Alright, today I have my 2004 Duramax. We're replacing the thermostats on it. Thermostats are located right there, but you gotta take all this off to get to it. So let's get into it. Okay, once you get it off enough, you're gonna wanna look for the petcock, which is a little screw right there. You want to have a drain pan down at the bottom to catch all the coolant you drain. Once you get your petcock somewhat loose, it'll start draining. If you take it out all the way, the more fluid will come out faster. I'm not trying to make a mess, so I'll get back when it's all drained out. Okay, while that's draining, you're gonna have to take a 1/2-inch breaker bar or ratchet and go down to the tensioner right here and pry it down so you can get the belt off of your AC compressor to take off the AC compressor then. Once you get your belt off of your AC compressor, just let your ratchet or whatever lay down there. You then need to take off your 2 clips right here and right here, and then take off your 4 bolts holding on the AC compressor and get the AC compressor out of the way. Okay, once you get the bolts off, you want to move the AC compressor out the way. Next up, you're gonna have to take off this bracket right here, because this is the housing that you need to get off to. And you need to take off this bracket as well as this bracket holding on the coolant line. Once you get these 4 bolts off and get the AC compressor out of the way, these bolts are 15mm. The one that holds on this little bracket is 12mm. And then you want to get this bracket off. But to get to the other side of that bracket, you got to take off these connectors and move them out of the way, which then you can get underneath there and get the other bolts to move this whole bracket. Okay, once you get these 2 connectors out of the way, you will have to twist and pull and push to get this one out. But there are 1 bolt here and 1 bolt way down there to get this bracket off, which then you can take off this bolt and the one underneath here to get this clamp off, and then we can proceed to taking off the thermostat housing. Once you get those 2 bolts out, this bracket will be loose enough to then push out of the way and get your ratchet or socket down there with your, I think, 12mm bolt to get that one off and this bolt off to take this bracket off to make the whole hose loose. Okay, once you get those 2 bolts out, this will then be loose, and it's time to take the 4 bolts that hold on 1, 2, 3, 4 that hold on the thermostat housing. Once you get those 4 bolts off, you should be able to pry the top off, where then you can now remove the thermostats. Now it is very important that you get the same exact thermostat that you take out of where it came from and don't switch them. The front one, as you can see, the gasket inside was falling apart. My symptoms for this was my heat. For idling, it would stay under 160, and when I would drive, it'd go up to 180-ish, and it would be hot inside, but then I'd stop and idle back down, and it would decrease the heat and cool off the motor again. So you want to make sure to get the gasket off, get the old one out, and then replace the same looking one where it came from. Okay, I got the front one in, as you can see. Now I took the back one out. This one has a seal that's all dry rotted, and as you can see, the front one and the back one look different, so it should be able to easy to tell which one's which this one obviously matches with this one as the back one. So I'm gonna go ahead and install it, and once that's in, we'll start reassembling. I almost forgot to mention the front one and the back one, once they're in there, the back one has these two back little holes on the back. It is important that those face backwards towards the motor. Once you get all the thermostat bolts in, you're going to want to torque them to 15 foot-pounds. Once you get those 4 bolts torqued to 15 foot-pounds, I would install this little bracket back here. I don't know the torque spec, but I just make it tight so it won't fall off, but like not too tight where it will snap. Next up, we're going to want to install the 2 bolts that hold on the pipe, and then move along to the little bracket with the 2 bolts that hold it on, and then slip these 2 clips back in there and plug them back in. Once you get these 2 bolts in, you're able to put the bolt there and way down there. You might have to use a magnet to get that one started to hold this clip on, and then you can put these 2 back where they go and plug them back in. Once you get those 2 clips in and clipped in, you're able to bring your AC compressor back over here and grab your bolts and start threading them in to tighten the AC compressor down. Once you get them snug, you're going to want to torque those 4 bolts down to 37 foot-pounds, and then you're going to want to reconnect that connector and this connector. Once you get those 4 bolts tightened down, I already did it, but you're able to put your serpentine belt back on. Make sure, absolutely make sure that all your pulleys are aligned and the belt is tight where it's supposed to be. Then you're able to remove this bar, and we can get back to putting back the petcock and filling it with coolant. Okay, I already did it, but the petcock, make sure it's all the way tight, and then you're able to put your fender liner back in, you putting the clips back where they're supposed to go and removing the obvious clippy pliers from holding this back. Once your petcock is in and your fender liner is back to, yeah, mine's pretty rusty, so I couldn't get this clip back in, but it's not going anywhere. We're able to start filling it back up with coolant. Once you fill it up to the full line, I always keep the top off when I first start it to let the air go somewhere that goes in the system. You then want to make sure everything looks right, everything's connected, you didn't forget anything, and then you go ahead and start it. Alright, once you let it run for maybe 5 minutes or so, I'd shut it off, check your coolant level. Mine went down a little bit, which is to be expected. Then make sure where your petcock is, there's no leaking, nothing. Make sure there's no leaking in here, and make sure there's no pressure before you take this off. But fill it back up and give her a test drive. I just took a little 10-minute test drive. Obviously you can see it's way above the 160 that it was at, so I say it worked perfect. Thank you for watching. And when you get back, make sure to check your coolant temperature again. Or not temperature, by level. My level was a little low when I got back, so I had to top it off. But other than that, that's it. 2004 Duramax